Greetings and welcome to another lecture in psychopathology. So in the last video, I was talking about the clinical picture of alcohol-related disorders, and so I'll take up where I left off, more or less, assuming the computer lets me. There we go. So I was talking about how it caused liver damage. I was talking about Korsakoff syndrome that comes from lack of thiamine, which comes from people who are literally drinking all of their meals, getting all the calories they need to survive from alcohol, which is possible but not healthy. I also want to again point out that alcohol's effects on the bodies is global. It affects everything. And alcohol has a really nasty withdrawal. It is more likely that for people to die from alcohol withdrawal than from withdrawal of almost any other drug. A lot of other drugs you may more or less wish that you were dying, but with alcohol withdrawal, it can and does kill people. This is not something that people want to fool around with. This is something that this withdrawal needs to be done, preferably in a hospital, in order to make sure that everything is going okay. But the big nasty side effect of alcohol withdrawal is alcohol withdrawal delirium, which used to be known as delirium tremens. Now, alcohol withdrawal delirium is a state that people get into when their bodies are, 100% used to having alcohol, and then the bodies are deprived of alcohol. And it consists of disorientation. People don't know where they are. They may not know who they are. Hallucinations, they may see things, they may hear things, they may believe things. Fear, there's a lot of terror that goes along with this because you're disoriented and hallucinating. There's going to be fear. Suggestibility, they very easily can believe things that may not be true or that they are told. And shaking, that's where the tremens come from, delirium tremens. It's very often the body will shake. Like I said, it's not just, psychological, it's physiological. It's physiological, and it has a really startlingly high death rate. 5% to 25% of people who have delirium tremens will die from it. Now, it's true that not everybody is necessarily going to get delirium tremens if you go through alcohol withdrawal, but still, it's common enough and it's dangerous enough that this is not something that, it's not like getting off nicotine where it's not going to kill you, it's just going to make you very unhappy. This is something that could actually kill you through the withdrawal. The withdrawal is worth it because the alcohol will kill people if the delirium tremens don't. And so it's better to go through the withdrawal under supervision and then, be off the alcohol, be healthier that way. Now, when we look at the biological causal factors of alcohol dependence, it's mostly what we're talking about here, possibly also abuse. We do know that there is another one of those fun physiological pathways that has a really, really long name. This one is the mesocortical limbic dopamine pathway, or the MCLP, which includes the limbic system and the cortex, and it involves dopamine. It's pretty much named exactly what you think it is. And so what goes on here, it's often known as the pleasure pathway, because it's an area in the cortex that lots of psychoactive drugs stimulate. It's not just alcohol. It's a lot of other drugs also stimulate this, and it's very, very reinforcing. This is something that feels great. They don't call it the pleasure pathway for nothing. And stimulants stimulate it. Alcohol does. Lots of drugs do. And that's why people like to take the drugs, because the drugs make them feel good. So that might indeed be part of it. There may also be a genetic vulnerability, not only to dependence, but also perhaps to just abuse. There may be some people that are simply more susceptible to it. We know that this plays a role because we know that alcoholism runs in families. Even when children are adopted out and raised in homes without alcoholics nearby, they still have a higher chance of becoming alcohol abusers if they have parents or other relatives who are alcohol abusers. We don't know exactly what it is. It sometimes looks like there's just sort of a it's less an alcohol addiction pathway and more of an addiction gene, maybe, that people may express this differently. Some may eat too much, drink too much, smoke too much, other types of addiction instead of just alcohol. But again, we're not fully aware of what might be going on here. The psychosocial causal factors, well, we got a lot of these. One of them is the good old traditional psychological blame your parents game. But it does appear that there are a number of ways in which parents can influence their children's use of alcohol. For instance, children may start imitating or modeling their parents who are indeed alcohol abusers. That may be one way this runs in the family. It's not the only way, but it might be one of the ways. It might be that we have parents who don't monitor their children enough, who don't keep a close enough eye on their kids, because children who are not monitored, at least somewhat, I mean, you don't have to keep an eagle eye on them 24/7, but when you have parents that simply don't, monitor or seem to care very much about their kids at all, those kids very often wind up abusing drugs. And if you've ever heard people say that marijuana is the gateway drug, no, alcohol is the gateway drug. Alcohol for many, many people is the first drug that they try, usually illicitly, taking it from parents or friends or whatever else. And alcohol does indeed lead to other drugs. A lot of people, quite frankly, that start with marijuana end with marijuana. But alcohol definitely gateway. Some have suggested that the stress of living with an alcoholic parent may drive people to drink. If you've ever heard that expression, that they're looking for a stress releaser or other types of abuse. I mentioned before in the prior video that some people use alcohol and other drugs to treat themselves from disorders because the alcohol makes them feel better, at least for a while. And so it may be used as a sort of medication in order to deal with the stress of being abused as well. There may be a psychological vulnerability. Perhaps this is what is inherited. As I pointed out, there's a big comorbidity deal going on here. And that very often people with other disorders also have problems with alcohol. Lots of people that go in because of alcohol abuse also have other disorders. It's a two-way street. So perhaps the diathesis is some sort of addiction vulnerability that stress brings out. We don't know for sure. We do know that stress itself has evolved. Bad types of coping. People who drink to forget or drink to relax or drink to feel better, particularly when that is done chronically, is not good. It's better to find other ways to deal with the stress. Preferably either removing the stress or, there are methods to deal with stress that are actually a lot healthier than drinking. A lot of kids may have started drinking, particularly in the past, because drinking was considered to be cool. All the popular kids drank, depending on the school that you were at. And so therefore, some kids drink because they want to be part of the group, or they want to be popular. They don't want to be seen as a chicken, or they don't, they want to feel like they're an adult because adults drink. So therefore they drink, or they drink because it's forbidden and look how cool they are. And they're a rebel. And boy, there are lots of reasons why people start. Much the same reason that people start smoking cigarettes, too. So remember a lot of these when we get into the tobacco, nicotine portion of this chapter's festivities. Problems with family relationships. Maybe that goes along with the parental guidance or the stress. A lot of these overlap. And a lot of these overlap a lot. There are also factors that come from the society that people live in. And it really is kind of interesting because even in the United States, we live in a whole bunch of little subcultures. Whether they're the subcultures we tend to think about in terms of age or in terms of ethnicity or whatever. There's also subcultures maybe in terms of religion and in terms of what part of the country you grow up in. And an awful lot of our cultures encourage drinking. Drinking is cool. Drinking is fun. Look at the commercials, Look at all these ads. I'm drinking to relax. Drinking makes you, makes you interesting. Drinking makes you, whatever. It makes you an adult. It's encouraged. It's pushed. I used to live in Panama City Beach, Florida, and during spring break, the amount of alcohol that was consumed was astonishing. because in a lot of ways it was encouraged. Everywhere there was advertising for beer. Everywhere there was beer being given away on occasion, or drinks being given away so that you drink more. And I mean, they very much encouraged drinking. What's interesting, though, is that there are cultures, both in the United States and in the wider world, where drinking is not encouraged like this. In fact, a number of religions may have prohibitions on drinking. Some sects of Christianity do. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, for instance, is not only against drinking alcohol, it's also against caffeine. And when you look at the rate of alcohol abuse in places like Utah, with a very high percentage of LDS people there, you will find that they have really low rates of alcohol abuse. It's not that it doesn't exist there, but there's not a lot of it, particularly in the outlying areas away from Salt Lake City in Utah, where the population is upwards of 90% LDS. I mean, there's a lot of people there that don't use alcohol because of religion. And alcohol abuse there is indeed quite rare. Not unknown, but quite rare. So I'm actually going to end this here because the next couple of slides are about treatment of alcohol-related disorders. And since I only have about 3.5 minutes left, let's go on to the next.